Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Kalamata, Greece on May 7th, 2026. Today, I'm going to discuss with you the latest developments in the criminal war of aggression on Iran, and particularly the abandonment by the Trump regime of its ill-fated Project Freedom, an attempt by the US military to force open the Strait of Hormuz. And related to that, I'm also going to focus today on what appears to be rampant manipulation of the oil markets for the benefit of some privileged insiders, probably within or related to the Trump regime. But before I get into it, I just want to remind you, if you find this video to be informative, please like and share it. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please become one and help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic resistance journalism. So with that, let's get into it. Now, as many of you will know by now, Trump has suspended indefinitely his Project Freedom, his plan for forcing open the critically important Strait of Hormuz. Trump announced Project Freedom on Sunday, May 3rd. Typically, he made this announcement in a poorly written but flamboyant post on Truth Social. And I've already discussed this at length. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically he characterized this act of aggression, which was going to escalate enormously the potential of a resumption of the hot war between Iran and the United States. He characterized it as a humanitarian gesture, as if, Trump has the slightest inclination towards humanitarianism, and also said that the US Navy would be guiding vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. At the time, it was unclear whether that meant that warships of the US Navy would be escorting vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, or whether it would be simply providing advice to them about how to get through it without being blown to smithereens. And lastly, Trump concluded this post by saying that interference with Project Freedom would have to be dealt with forcefully, which he professed not to want to have to do. So in any case, on May 4th, the first day of Project Freedom, Reason to Resist published a report in which we described this newest military misadventure as a suicide mission and argued that it was doomed to fail. And, I'm not going to repeat everything that I said in that report. Suffice it to say that having been in the Strait of Hormuz myself, in late March during the hot phase of this war just a few weeks ago, having spoken to military experts, political figures from the area, including Bandar Abbas, and examined a wealth of analysis on the subject, it was my conclusion that there's no military solution to Iran's seizure of control over the Strait of Hormuz. The only way to open it up to international maritime traffic again, which is where it was before Trump and Netanyahu launched their criminal war of aggression, is to make meaningful concessions to Iran. In other words, the solution, if there's one to be had, is purely political. There's no military solution. And any attempt to either guide vessels through the Strait of Hormuz by giving them advice about where to go or escorting them would end in disaster. So that even with that extreme skepticism that we expressed on Monday, I can't say that even I imagined that this thing would fall apart as quickly as it did. On May 5th, a mere day after Project Freedom commenced, remember it was announced on Sunday, came into effect on Monday, or was supposed to come into effect on Monday. On May 5th, Tuesday, Trump announced that he was suspending Project Freedom for a short period of time. That's the way he put it, but he did not specify an end date for the suspension of the project, which means that in effect it has been suspended indefinitely. Now, it became quickly apparent, through the fog of war, there were claims that the Iranians made claims that they struck U.S. naval vessels that tried to come through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Navy denied that its vessels had been struck, but didn't deny that they had been fired upon. There were credible reports that vessels belonging to states or flagged by states that Iran understandably deems to be hostile, like the United Arab Emirates, had been attacked. And in fact, the Iranian side admitted readily that it had attacked a UAE flagged vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. There was also a missile strike, or perhaps there was more than one missile, on a very important oil facility of the United Arab Emirates, Fujairah, on the Gulf of Oman, or at least on that side of the Strait of Hormuz, the southern side of the Strait of Hormuz. It was very difficult to make sense of where this was all going and what exactly transpired during those 24 hours. But one thing was absolutely crystal clear, and that is that very few vessels were going to try to transit through the Strait of Hormuz without the cooperation of the Iranian military. There were, by the way, also some reports, which I have not been able to verify, that U.S. Air Force refueling aircraft, at least one, possibly two, went down in the Persian Gulf. They certainly were active at that time. And as I explained in my report on Monday, they were probably active for the purpose of ensuring that U.S. warplanes were constantly in the sky, with an effort to deter Iran's Navy from entering the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know whether, in fact, those refuelers crashed, one or more of them, but that is one other additional piece of information which may have impacted Trump's decision to bring this fiasco to a quick and merciful conclusion. Now, immediately after Trump issued his announcement, that Project Freedom had been suspended. And by the way, here's that announcement. You'll see that he prefaced it by saying that it was his decision had been initiated or prompted by a request from Pakistan and other countries. Trump is always trying to characterize his acts of desperation as gestures of kindness to friendly states like Pakistan. And he also characterized the military catastrophe that the U.S. has suffered over the past 2 months as a tremendous military success, and importantly asserted that great progress, capitalizing the G in great and the P in progress, had been made toward a complete and final agreement with representatives of Iran. And he said, "We have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and effect, Project Freedom will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not the agreement can be finalized and signed." Now, after this claim of great progress was posted, I could not restrain myself and immediately commented as follows: "The pathological liar in the White House now claims that Iran agreed to something." And as you just saw from Trump's post, he didn't give any indication as to what they had purportedly agreed to. He just said there had been an agreement to something. And then he said, and then I went on and said, "What is that something, and what credible evidence is there that Iran agreed to anything? Never ever trust a word Trump says about negotiations unless it is backed up by objective, independent, and persuasive evidence." Now, this brings me to the question of the endless peace kabuki theater, which started, frankly, long before Trump entered the White House. It really was launched in earnest by the Biden regime after Israel commenced its genocidal rampage on the Palestinian people in October of 2023. From that moment, we were constantly being told by officials of the Biden regime, and primarily through anonymous leaks to the compliant corporate media in the United States, that the Biden regime was doing everything possible it could to bring the slaughter in Gaza to an end. We were constantly being told of Blinken's latest trip to Saudi Arabia, or to Kuwait, or to Bahrain, or to Jordan, or to Egypt, or to Israel, sitting in on meetings with Trump, and how he was trying so hard to end the violence, end the massacres of Palestinian civilians, but those pesky little Israelis just wouldn't listen. They felt that their existence was threatened, and yes, we don't necessarily like their methods, but they're a sovereign state, and at the end of the day, we can't tell Israel what to do, and on and on and on. This went on from October 2023 to the time that Biden was mercifully removed from the White House. And as soon as Donald Trump replaced Biden, it was the same shtick. We were told over and over again about how his so-called peace envoy, Steve Witkoff, who has mucked everything up. Wherever Steve Witkoff has gone, the blood of innocents has flowed freely. He has not achieved any of his purported objectives, whether it be in Ukraine, Gaza, or in Iran, to end the slaughter, to end war, to end the violence. In fact, if anything, he's caused it to become worse. But he was presented to us as a good faith actor seeking peace on behalf of Donald Trump. And we were told this in respect of the Ukraine war. Did you notice, by the way, that after all of the drama that we were treated to in 2025, the so-called negotiations to end the Ukraine war, that Trump isn't even trying at this time to end the Ukraine war? He's not even pretending to try. All of the discussion about negotiations between Russia and the United States have basically evaporated, even though we were told over and over again about how this was a priority for Trump and he could get it done in 24 hours. And then we were told, that Trump was had put together this epic, peace plan, the Gaza peace plan that was going to bring peace to the region of West Asia for the first time in millennia. It was the greatest peace deal that had ever been done. And now, since that supposedly came into effect in October of last year, we've seen very clearly that the Gaza genocide continues on a daily basis, albeit at a lower level of intensity. And of course, then there's the Iran war. Not only did Witkoff, the supposed peace envoy of Donald Trump, fail to avoid a war, but on his watch, two wars of aggression were launched against Iran, one in June of last year, and the most recent one on February 28th, and that one is ongoing. Now, quite apart from the fact that we had ample reason to believe that Donald Trump was lying about wanting to avoid war with Iran, just based upon the record of his first and second administrations. I won't get into all of the acts of violence and warmongering, militarism, violations of international law committed by the Trump regime during his first administration. I'll just content myself for purposes of this report with what's happened in the past year or so. But in addition to all of that, all of those, just the general propensity of Donald Trump to use violence and domination and subjugation as a means of achieving his objectives, whatever they may be, there was absolutely no reason to believe at any point over the past few days that Iran and the United States were anywhere close to a peace deal. And why do I say that? Because there is absolutely no overlap between their two negotiating positions. On the one hand, you have the Iranians who are insisting, amongst other things, that their international legal right to enrich uranium for peaceful civilian purposes, that be preserved. They are demanding reparations, which they have a right to under international law because this war of aggression violated the United Nations Charter and has done very significant damage to Iran. They are demanding that they continue to control the Strait of Hormuz. They are demanding a lifting of these illegal sanctions from which their economy has been suffering for decades. They are demanding an unfreezing of Iranian assets were effectively stolen from them, again in violation of international law. I could go on, but these are the core demands of the Iranian government. And on the American side, you have a demand that Iran completely open up the Strait of Hormuz, that it relinquish any and all control over the Strait of Hormuz, and that Iran abandon its civilian nuclear program, that it also abandon its ballistic missiles, something which Iran's never going to do because it's the best deterrent that it has, that it abandon support for its allies in the region. So you have these maximalist demands on the part of the Trump regime. You have reasonable demands on the part of demands that are perfectly consistent with international law on the side of the Iranian government. But whatever you may think of the fairness or reasonableness of one side's demands versus the other side's demands, the fact is there's no overlap between them. Absolutely none. And there has never been a point in time, not one point in time, when an official of the U.S. Government, one who had authority to speak with respect to these matters, went on the record and said that the Trump regime was prepared to accept any of the core demands of Iran. Not all, just one. For example, never been any indication that they would accept the concept of having to pay reparations to Iran, that they would accept having to remove US forces from the region, which is another core demand of the Iranian government, that they would accept the lifting of sanctions, that they would accept the unfreezing of assets, that they would accept that Iran would retain control over the Strait of Hormuz. They've never indicated in an official capacity, the Trump regime, acceptance of any one of the demands, let alone all of them, of the Iranian government. So there's absolutely no overlap between the two negotiating positions. And in fact, every day, the language coming out of people like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth is not only maximalist, but they're demonizing Iran. They are making outrageous claims about Iran. Apparently, Trump told some children in the White House recently that before he attacked Iran, Iran was just a couple of weeks away from killing them. Okay, this kind of language tells you all you need to know about the attitude of the Trump regime towards compromise. Their attitude is one of unequivocal rejection of any form of meaningful compromise. And so there's absolutely no reason to think that these two sides are even remotely close to a peace deal. The rational expectation is that for the time being, for the foreseeable future, there will be no peace deal, and they would even get remotely close to a peace deal. Now, quite apart from all of that, when Trump made this claim that they were close to a peace deal on a Tuesday, and by the way, as you will all probably know, this is not the first time he's made that claim, and it turned out to be completely false. Quite apart from the complete lack of overlap between the negotiating positions of the two parties, the fact of the matter is that Trump has an incentive to lie. He has an incentive to lie because every time he tells the public that the two sides are on the verge of a peace deal, the price of oil magically comes down. Even though there's no credibility whatsoever to the claim, he manages to suppress the price of oil. And that is something that he is desperate to do because the price of oil has been increasing relentlessly over the past couple of months since he launched this criminal war of aggression. And that is causing immense economic pain around the world, and particularly to Trump's base. For example, farmers who can't afford fertilizer anymore, just ordinary workers who voted for Trump on the basis that their cost of living was going to be brought under control. So Trump is in serious trouble politically, and therefore he has a strong incentive to lie in order to try to suppress the price of oil. So you have his record of warmongering and complete failure to achieve meaningful peace in any of the wars in which the U.S. is involved directly or indirectly. You have a complete absence of overlap between the negotiating positions of the two sides. And you have the strong incentive motivation on the part of Trump regime to lie about a peace deal being just over the horizon. When you add it all up, the rational thing to do, when you hear Donald Trump saying that the two sides are on the verge of peace in this conflict with Iran, is to assume he's lying, unless his claim is backed up by credible independent evidence, and there was no credible independent evidence to back it up. Now, after I expressed this extreme skepticism on X, sure enough, Iranian officials quickly confirmed that there was no agreement and that the parties were not even close to an agreement. This was an alert issued a few hours after I put that post up on X by The Guardian. It reads, Ebrahim Rezai, the spokesperson of the Iranian Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Commission. So here you have a senior official of the Iranian government who's in a position to know, going on the record. He poured cold water on the Axios report. Oh yes, the ever-present Axios, claiming that, the U.S. and Iran were nearing a one-page memorandum to end the war. Just that alone, a one-page memorandum is going to end the war. What planet do these people live on? They're like literally just going to take a piece of toilet paper, a napkin, and write a few clauses, and that's going to end this war. That ain't happening, folks. There's going to have to be a much more detailed agreement than that for any kind of cessation of hostilities to occur. But in any case, Ebrahim Rezai was quoted as saying that the American proposal, which was given in response to the Iranian proposal, was a wish list and not a reality. In a fiery statement on X, he said, quote, "Americans will not gain in a lost war what they failed to achieve in face-to-face negotiations. Iran has its finger on the trigger and is ready. If they do not surrender and grant the necessary concessions, or if they are, or their lapdogs attempt any mischief," evidently a reference there to the Arab autocracies and or Israel, "we will respond with a harsh and regrettable response." Now, does that sound to you like Iran had agreed to terms of peace or was on the verge of doing so? And then this alert by The Guardian goes on and says, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, Ismail Baghai, also responded to the Axios report telling the Iranian isn't a news agency that the U.S. proposal is still being reviewed by Tehran. Now, the commentary of these two gentlemen was quickly echoed by the lead negotiator of the Iranian government in the negotiations with the United States. This is a post on X that was put out after I expressed extreme skepticism that they were on the verge of a peace deal by Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. And he said, Operation Trust Me Bro failed. Now back to routine with Operation Foxios. I believe what he means when he says Operation Trust Me Bro, and this is essentially consistent with our analysis of Project Freedom, is that the Americans were basically telling, the commercial shipping industry, hey, we know how you can get safely through the Strait of Hormuz. You just need to avoid this spot and stay away from that spot. Navigate through the obstacles. We'll tell you how to do it. Just trust me, bro, and you'll be fine. And of course, there was never any prospect that the owners of these extraordinarily expensive and highly vulnerable vessels were going to put them at extreme risk just based upon some verbal assurances from the United States military. And when Mr. Ghalibaf wrote, now back to routine with Operation Foxios, I believe what he was doing was combining the French word for fake, which is faux, with the word axios. And he's clearly intimating that the Axios reporting on discussions between the United States and Iran was a fraud, which by all indications it in fact was and continues to be. So where do we stand now? As of this moment, there's no agreement. I just checked all the various sources, the X accounts of the lead or the main political figures in Iran. I checked the reputable corporate media in the West. I looked at resistance channels, and there's absolutely no indication of any kind of an agreement between the US and Iran or any indication that they're anywhere close to an agreement. The Strait of Hormuz remains firmly under Iranian control, and the US continues its efforts to blockade Iran's ports in violation of the ceasefire and international law. In other words, we're exactly where we were before Project Freedom was announced, except for one thing, and that is that the Trump regime looks even more ridiculous now than it did immediately before the announcement of Project Freedom. Now, in order to minimize the embarrassment arising from the failure of Project Freedom, US officials leaked a story to the US corporate media. It is a story which I strongly believe to be fake, and I'm going to explain to you the reasons for my views about this story. This is a report that appeared in NBC News within the past 24 hours. And in fact, it appeared promptly, really quite quickly after Trump's announcement that he had suspended this debacle of a military operation, Project Freedom. This is an NBC News report published. Trump's abrupt U-turn on a plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz came after backlash from allies. And the subheader is, Saudi Arabia, a key Gulf ally, suspended the U.S. military's ability to use its bases and airspace to carry out the operation, sources say. Now let's take a closer look at this article, shall we? Now I see a lot of commentary in the alternative media, especially the corporate media, lending credibility to the story. And I really wonder how many of the people who seem to think that this is a persuasive story, that it's true or likely to be true, have read carefully what the story actually says. So we're going to do that right now. Now, I've highlighted in blue what I consider to be the most pertinent parts of this story. But let's just go at the beginning there. Trump surprised Gulf allies by announcing Project Freedom. I'm reading from the top. This is an excerpt of much of the article. He surprised them by announcing Project Freedom on social media Sunday afternoon, angering leadership in Saudi Arabia. In response, the kingdom informed the U.S. it would not allow the U.S. military to fly aircraft from Prince Sultan Air Base southeast of Riyadh or fly through Saudi airspace to support the effort. The officials said. Let's be clear here. The officials are U.S. officials, two of them. I repeat, two. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Neither of whom, for some reason, is willing to be named. And we know virtually nothing about these officials. We don't, not only do we not know their names, we don't know, where do they work in, like, State Department? Are they in the U.S. military? Are they senior officials? Are they junior officials? And what do they mean by officials? So we don't really have any information about these people that would even enable us to make a plausible assessment of their credibility. Nothing. All we're told is that they're U.S. officials, and again, there are two of them. And then the article goes on, says other close Gulf allies were also caught off guard. The president spoke with leaders in Qatar after the effort had already begun. So here's the critical part, the part I've highlighted in blue. A Saudi source told NBC News that Trump and the Crown Prince, quote, have been in touch regularly, close quote. Saudi officials were also in touch with Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, U.S. Central Command, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the source added. Just pause there. We don't know anything about the Saudi source either. We don't know, this article doesn't even say that the Saudi source is a senior government official. For all we know, it's just some, could be some Saudi journalist who may or may not know what he or she is talking about. But we have no information which would enable us to assess the credibility of the Saudi source. And then, but they put the question specifically to the source, whoever the source may be, NBC News did, asking the source whether the announcement of Project Freedom caught the Saudi leaders by surprise. In response, the Saudi source said this, quote, the problem with that premise is that things are happening quickly in real time, close quote. The source said Saudi Arabia was, quote, very supportive of the diplomatic efforts by Pakistan to broker a deal between Iran and the U.S. to end the war. In other words, the source is not only declining to confirm the truth of what the two unnamed U.S. officials told NBC News, but the source is casting doubt on the veracity of the account given to NBC News by those two U.S. officials, because the source, the Saudi source, says that there's a problem with the premise of their account of what happened. What does that mean? Obviously, it means that the Saudi source wants people to doubt whether or not the two U.S. officials are telling the truth. And then the Saudi source goes on and says something which is a complete non sequitur. They're very supportive of the diplomatic efforts by Pakistan to broker a deal. Well, that doesn't tell you anything about whether it's true that the Saudis told the Americans they can no longer use their airspace. And quite apart from all of that, my friends, the Saudis have an incentive, even if you could take this as being some kind of an endorsement by a Saudi source of what these two unnamed U.S. officials told NBC News. The Saudis have an incentive to lie about whether or not they're allowing the Americans to use their airspace, because if they admit it, they will certainly come under attack again by Iran in the event that a hot war erupts. And as the Iranians have proven, they are eminently capable of penetrating Saudi U.S. air defenses and are also eminently capable of striking targets with precision. So the last thing the Saudis want is to cause the Iranians to believe that they're allowing the Americans to use their airspace. So the fact that they have an incentive to lie is surely something that should be taken into account as well. And quite apart from all of that, the Saudis are just, the Saudi regime, this is just a pathological liar. They've been telling us for decades, for example, that they support the Palestinian cause, and every step of the way they've been stabbing the Palestinian people in the back. And I could, go on and on about the record of dishonesty of the Saudi autocracy. So why would anybody believe any of this, even if the story had been confirmed by an unnamed Saudi source about whom we know nothing? But the fact of the matter is the Saudi source is pouring cold water on the account of these two U.S. officials. Now, the article goes on and it says, ask whether the announcement of Project Freedom caught the, I'm reading it further down, the second last paragraph. A White House official said in a statement when asked about some Gulf state leaders being caught off guard by the announcement of the U.S. effort to help ships transit the Strait of Hormuz, regional allies were notified in advance. Okay, so that also contradicts the story that we're being given by these two unnamed sources. And finally, a Middle Eastern diplomat said the U.S. did not coordinate Project Freedom with the Omanis until after Trump made the announcement. The U.S. made an announcement and then coordinated with us, the diplomat said, adding, we were not upset or angry. So, again, so how does that support the account given by these two U.S. officials? And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the two U.S. officials, presumably these are people who have some kind of role inside the Trump administration. The Trump regime has incentive to lie about its reasons for suspending Project Freedom. Would they rather you believe that the reason why they pulled the plug on Project Freedom is because the Saudis intervened and said you can't use our airspace? Or would they rather you believe that they pulled the plug on Project Freedom because the U.S. Navy is incapable of protecting the ships in the Persian Gulf and basically chickened out? I think they'd rather you believe the former than the latter. So this, to me, stinks of a cover story cooked up by the Trump regime to make the abandonment of Project Freedom seem less embarrassing than it actually is and ought to be. And the other thing I want to say is, why are there always like these stories that in the corporate media, from unnamed officials of the U.S. government, almost always there's two of them, almost always two. Why is there two? Because if it's just one, the story is going to be less credible. So they come up with, they assign two people to go and do it so that they can say, or people will think, oh, look, another U.S. official corroborated what one official told them. Therefore, that means this must be true. It's not just one person making this up, but two people said it. It's almost become, axiomatic that two unnamed officials will go to some corporate media outlet or outlets and, come up with some cockamamie story that is designed to make the U.S. government look better than it did, just to inspire people with confidence that the cockamamie story is actually true. I don't believe any of this, frankly, and I'm particularly skeptical that the Saudis will ever tell the Americans under any circumstances to stop using their airspace, because after all, the Saudis are a vassal of Washington. And are they really going to prevent the Americans from using their airspace when the Americans have air bases in Saudi Arabia? Really? I doubt that. The Saudi autocracy's wealth, the preservation of its wealth, the protection of its wealth is intimately tied up with the presence of U.S. military forces on Saudi soil. They are the ultimate guarantors, or at least in theory, they are the ultimate guarantors of the vast wealth of the Saudi autocracy. And I think at the end of the day, if the Trump regime or any other U.S. regime wants to use Saudi airspace, to conduct wars of aggression in West Asia, the Saudis are going to play along whether they like it or not. Now, although there were plenty of reasons to dismiss Trump's claim that the U.S. and Iran were close to a peace deal, oil market professionals took Trump's claim seriously, or at least pretended to do so. And so too did the corporate media. In fact, the corporate media did everything it could to promote the bogus claim, yet again, that the United States and Iran were on the verge of a peace deal. I'm going to show you one example of this. This is a alert that was issued by The Guardian. There were plenty of reports by The Guardian within the 24-hour period when Trump made the claim that they were close to a peace deal along these lines. This alert stated that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has announced the Strait of Hormuz could reopen following the end of, quote, threats from aggressors, close quote. And this is citing Reuters, another corporate media outlet, citing state media. The IRGC Navy said the safe and stable transit through the key waterway could be possible. It follows Donald Trump's remarks yesterday that he has paused his Project Freedom to open the Strait of Hormuz due to great progress being made towards a complete and final agreement with Iran. So notice the juxtaposition here. There is a statement that the IRGC says that the opening of the Hormuz Strait could be possible, immediately followed by a reference to Trump's claim that there was great progress in the negotiation. This is being set up and framed in such a way that the IRGC statement is being offered to you as confirmatory evidence of Trump's claim that they're on the verge of a peace deal. And what is not said here, it's not even asked, which is what could the IRGC possibly have meant from the phrase threats from aggressors? Well, if you've been paying any attention to what the IRGC have been saying, what the civilian leadership of the Iranian government have been saying, it's not just the insertion of U.S. warships into the Strait of Hormuz, which would constitute a threat from an aggressor. They've been very clear that they regard the blockade on Iranian ports as a threat from an aggressor and an act of war. They've called it an act of war. So when the IRGC was saying that they could reopen, not that they will, but they could reopen the Strait of Hormuz following the end of threats from the aggressors, they were almost certainly referring not only to a suspension of Project Freedom, but also to a termination of the blockade of Iranian ports. And there's been absolutely no indication from the Trump regime at any point in time since the blockade was lifted or imposed that the Trump regime is willing to lift it. None of that is mentioned by The Guardian here. If they had mentioned that, then it would have introduced a note of skepticism into the idea that the IRGC was lending credibility to Donald Trump's claim that they were close to a peace deal. But the Guardian studiously avoided elucidating or elaborating on what the IRGC might have meant by the phrase threats from aggressors, and specifically that it almost certainly meant not only the Project Freedom, but also the blockade on Iranian ports. Now, the corporate media also quoted so-called market professionals who claimed that Trump's unsubstantiated claim of a peace deal being on the horizon, quoted market professionals to the effect that that claim had brought about a tidal wave of relief in the oil markets. And here again, I'm picking on The Guardian today because it likes to posture as a progressive media outlet, but I could find any number of articles from other corporate media outlets in the West along these lines. It's not just The Guardian. So here is an article published on May 6th, the day after Trump announced the suspension of the Debacle Project Freedom. You see the title, Oil Prices Fall as Trump says Strait of Hormuz open to all if Iran accepts deal. So the market reacted by sharply driving down the price of oil. And in fact, it went down, I believe, by about 7%. The article says in The Guardian, oil prices fell and stock markets rose as Trump said the war with Iran would end and the Strait of Hormuz would be open to all if Tehran struck a deal with Washington. And then let's go further into the article here. And you'll see it says, initially the news sent Brent crude oil, which had risen as much as 6% earlier this week after the latest attacks in the Middle East, tumbling 11% to as low as $97 a barrel. It was the first time it has fallen below $100 since April 22nd. Now, an 11% decline in the price of Brent crude in one day, that's a huge drop, okay? I'm not saying it hasn't happened before, but that is an unusual fluctuation in the price of Brent crude. And you can see this by, looking over the last several years at the development in the price of Brent crude. This doesn't happen very often. So the market clearly was attaching huge importance to Trump's Truth Social post. And it goes on and says the crude price had been falling on Wednesday morning, accelerated after a report by Axios news site that the White House believed it was getting close to agreeing a one-page memorandum. Yes, they're going to settle the war on a napkin. It said the two sides were ready to set a framework for more detailed nuclear talks, citing 4 sources, including 2 U.S. officials. There you have the ubiquitous 2 U.S. officials, neither of whom, for some mysterious reason is willing to be named. However, The Guardian writes, oil pared its losses later in the day, trading down 7.3 at 101.83 a barrel. As Iran said, it was an American wish list and not a reality. So even though Iran came out and poo-pooed this claim by Trump, the market still, drove down the price of oil on that day by 7.3%. It's still a quite significant fluctuation in the price of oil. And then the Guardian article goes on and quotes this character. The chief investment strategist at Wealth Club, Susanna Streeter, said, quote, a dam of tension has eased with relief flooding into financial markets amid hopes that hostilities will cease in the Middle East with the Trump administration making conciliatory moves. Quote, relief is starting to seep into the bond markets with UK gilt yields easing off amid hopes that inflation might not head quite as high if a longer-term resolution can be negotiated. Now, the latest reports indicate that the market continues to swallow or promote Trump's horseshit about peace being on the verge of breaking out everywhere in West Asia. Here is a report published a couple hours ago today, a few hours ago by oilprice.com. Front month Brent crude futures dropped to below $100 per barrel again in morning trade in Europe on Thursday, reversing earlier gains as the market hopes the US and Iran could be able to reach an agreement that would eventually reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What the hell is the basis of that hope? A Truth Social post by this pathological liar who has an enormous motive to lie about the prospects for peace between Iran and the United States? Is that the basis for hopes? As you may know, I was a securities class actions lawyer for most of my professional career, and I spent 25 or more years. I've been practicing for over 30 years. About 25 years of those 30 plus years of practice, my focus was securities class action, securities regulation, capital markets, regulation, bond offerings, stock offerings. And so I'm very familiar with the evolution of the markets over the years. It was my business to understand, to the best of my ability, the markets. It was my professional responsibility, as a matter of fact. And I'm absolutely amazed at the discrepancy between, the orthodoxy, the market orthodoxy, that people are, the people who drive prices of bonds and stocks are rational actors and are making, decisions based upon all available, publicly available information, and the markets are semi-strong form efficient and blah, blah, blah. There's this whole theory about what the markets are and how they function and the reality. And here you're seeing a stark example of the awful reality of how these markets function today. If you're actually thinking rationally, you would not attach any weight whatsoever to Trump's claims that Iran and the United States are on the verge of peace, because Trump has a motive to lie, has a demonstrated record of lying, and there's no independent, credible evidence to back it up. And in fact, the Iranian government, which has proven itself to be far more truthful in this war than has the United States government, is expressly denying that they're on the verge of a peace deal. And there is absolutely no common ground between the two negotiating positions, as I explained earlier. There's no rational basis to hope for an imminent peace deal. So if anything, the price of Brent crude should be going up, not down, because the global supplies are evaporating. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And I also want to draw your attention to a very interesting analysis published by the Kobesi letter. I believe this was published yesterday May 6th, yes. And you'll see that it is widely viewed. This has a 2.6 million views. The Kobesi letter has 1.8 million followers and describes itself as an industry-leading commentary on the global capital markets. And they wrote, according to our analysis, 920 million worth of crude oil shorts were taken 70 minutes before an Axios report claimed the US and Iran were near a 14-point deal to end the war. At 3:40 a.m. Eastern Time today, nearly 10,000 contracts worth of crude oil shorts were taken without any major news. This is equivalent to approximately 920 million in notional value, an unusually large trade for 3:40 a.m. Eastern Time. At 4:50 a.m. Eastern Time, just 70 minutes later, Axios reported that the U.S. is close to a memorandum of understanding to end the Iran war. Just 70 minutes later, at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, oil prices had fallen over 12%, with these crude oil shorts gaining approximately 125 million. Minutes later, Iran launched the Persian Gulf Strait Authority and oil prices surged plus 8%. What just happened? As someone who has prosecuted numerous claims involving insider trading allegations in my legal career, I find the timing and amount of these trades to be extremely suspicious, and I have no hesitation in saying that law enforcement authorities should investigate them thoroughly. They have the power to determine who is behind these trades and to ascertain what information, if any, these people had of a non-public nature this person or persons had. I would hazard a guess, and it's no more than a guess, that these people have close connections with the Trump crime family and may be even members of Trump's immediate family. Hell, it could be Trump himself who's behind these trades. If any president has proven himself capable of this kind of self-dealing and criminality, it is without question Donald Trump. But there's something much worse than insider trading at stake here. First of all, a central character in these market manipulations is Barak Ravid, the Axios reporter. And as many of you will know, Ravid is a former member of the Israeli military, not just a former member of the Israeli military, but he was an intelligence officer with Unit 8200, the intelligence gathering unit of the Israeli military. And you look at the overall, it's not just the fact that he served in this intelligence unit in the Israeli military, but you just read his writing, his so-called journalism, and you know very clearly where his loyalties lie. This man's political sympathies lie very firmly with the state of Israel. And so he has, as somebody who is politically and ideologically aligned, and perhaps in many other ways aligned with Israel, he has a strong incentive to promote the narrative that Iran and the U.S. are on the verge of a peace deal. Why? Well, because as we've seen, the market is more than willing to swallow this nonsense. And when it does so, the price of oil drops precipitously. And this is the single biggest threat currently of a political nature to the Trump-Netanyahu project to destroy Iran. The single biggest political threat is that their attempts to destroy Iran drive the price of oil and gas and other essential commodities into the stratosphere. And this causes huge political instability, unrest in the United States, forcing Trump and the Republicans to bring an end to this war, which would require them to make meaningful concessions to the state of Iran. So in order to, by suppressing the price of oil, what these characters are doing basically is they're buying time, more time for the United States, Israel, if they can do it, to achieve their objective of destroying Iran. That's what this is all about. It's all about buying time by keeping increases in the price of oil to the greatest minimum degree. So he has an ideological incentive to promote the lie that the United States and Iran are on the verge of a peace deal. And of course, for the reasons I've just articulated, Trump also has a strong incentive to promote the lie. He wants more time and space to be able to complete if he can, this criminal war of aggression, which would mean destroying Iran as a sovereign state that is capable of defending its own interests. And frankly, the corporate media, whatever they may say, even outlets like The Guardian, which seem to dislike Donald Trump, and maybe they do. But at the end of the day, they, as you can tell from the overall tenor of their reporting, their neoconservatism, their militarism, their white supremacy, they want to see Netanyahu and Trump destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran. They want Iran to be reduced to an abject vassal of Washington because they're completely on board with this project of Anglo-American hegemony. They're desperate to perpetuate it and to prevent the demise of the Anglo-American empire. So however much they may dislike Trump, they want to see the destruction of Iran, and they understand perfectly well that Trump is going to need time, politically speaking and militarily speaking, in order to pull this off, if it can be pulled off, and I don't think it can, but they probably harbor delusions that it can be pulled off. And so the way they buy him time is just like Badek Ravid is fomenting, promoting this nonsense that there is a peace deal just around the corner. Every time the price of oil starts to go to unmanageable levels, they trot out yet another fake story about how there's a peace deal just around the corner. So they suppress the price of oil and allow and keep public discontent to a manageable degree in the United States so that Trump can continue to prosecute this criminal war of aggression. Now, my most important message to you today, my friends, is that you shouldn't be lulled into a false sense of security. And to me, that is the most nefarious part of all of this. Sure, insider trading is a serious criminal offense. It should deeply trouble us all that people with ties to the Trump administration, perhaps even senior officials within the Trump administration, are profiting from market manipulation. These people are criminals. If whoever's doing it, if that's what's being done, they're criminals. They should be held to account. But something that's much more concerning, much more damaging, is that members of the public are being lulled into a false sense of security by these fake stories that there's peace just around the corner. There's no indication whatsoever, I must say it again, that a peace deal is realistically possible now or for the foreseeable future, which means the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed because there is no military solution to its opening. And that means that the global economic crisis will become increasingly severe. And if you want to see an indication of what's coming, I want to share two things with you. This is a report yesterday about the last oil tanker from the Middle East arriving in California. And by the way, as the article notes, the price of gasoline in California is now more than $6 a gallon. I believe that's the most expensive gasoline price in the United States on average. And the article reports that the vessel entitled the New Corolla left the Middle East for California before Trump and Netanyahu launched the criminal war of aggression. It delivered 2 million barrels of crude oil from Iraq to Long Beach. It was the last planned shipment to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The California Energy Commission Vice Chair Siva Gunda told legislators on Tuesday that the state can meet fuel demand for the next 6 weeks with its current supply. California imports about a third of its oil from the Gulf, and the state will now have to find new sources to replace it. Good luck with that, California. And finally, check out this. This is from the American Automobile Association. Its report on national average gas prices. You can see that yesterday, on the 6th of May 2026, the average price of regular gasoline in the United States was $4.54, and that was an increase from the 5th of May, when the average price was $4.48. So despite the futures, Brent crude futures market reacting, taking seriously this bogus claim that Iran and the United States are on the verge of a peace deal, and driving down the price of Brent crude, the price of gasoline in the United States went up. And if you scroll over, you'll see the column for diesel. On May 6th, the average price for a gallon of diesel was $5.67. The highest recorded average price is for regular unleaded, according to the AAA, is $5.16. So the price of gas, the average national price of gas in the United States, is rapidly approaching the record high. And you can see, again, the column on the left under the heading regular, there has been a steady and sharp increase. A year ago, the average was $3.16, the national average. A month ago, it was $4.12. A week ago, it was $4.23. On May 5th, $4.48, and May 6th, $4.54. So it is inexorably rising, whatever the fluctuations may be in the price of Brent crude in the futures market. And, once those supplies run out, then you're really going to see the shit hit the fan. And that's going to happen all around the world in the next several weeks, or begin to happen. Because those last tankers that left the Strait of Hormuz just before the war began have now arrived at their destinations, and there ain't no more coming for the foreseeable future. Now, the Trump and Netanyahu regimes, to conclude my report, and the fraudulent corporate media want you to focus on the markets, the fraudulent markets. So here, for example, is a post from Donald Trump. I think this was either today or yesterday. It really is unbelievable. But the stock market hit an all-time high. When we are on the precipice of a global economic catastrophe, the casino stock market is hitting an all-time high yet again. The situation has gotten so bad in the stock markets. The stock markets have become so utterly divorced from economic fundamentals that even this character, the so-called legendary investor Warren Buffett, had this to say in the last few days about the markets. And the title, as you can see, of this article is Why Warren Buffett Says He Doesn't Understand Markets Anymore. He's one of the wealthiest men on earth, one of the most respected investors. And I'll just read a little bit of this article to you. Speaking in an interview with CNBC, Buffett said the nature of investing has changed so much that even he finds it difficult to make sense of many valuations. Quote, I understand fewer businesses as a percentage of the whole than I did 10 years ago. Adding that he has not kept up with newer industries in the same way younger investors have. Buffett used a strong comparison to explain the current state of the markets. Quote, the market always feels like a church with a casino attached. So basically a lot of faith, faith-based investing, I suppose, and tremendous amount of appetite for risk and trying to make money without actually contributing anything to the real economy. I think that's what he means by a casino. And the casino, he said, has gotten very attractive to people. According to him, trading activity today is increasingly driven by short-term bets rather than long-term investing. He added that there are now more people in a gambling mood than at any time in the past. Buffett's concern is not just about speculation, but about the scale of it. He said many traders are making decisions based on short-term price movements rather than business fundamentals. This, he warned, can lead to prices that do not reflect the real value of companies. Now, to repeat again, capital markets are something that I've spent a lot of time studying in the course of my legal career. And I must say, I've never seen anything like what we're seeing today. The elites want you to believe that they have everything under control. In reality, they've unleashed forces over which they have little to no control. And how can we expect them, after all, to control these complex and mighty forces when they can't even control themselves? I'll say it again, we are heading towards a severe global economic crisis. I say this not, to establish my credentials as somebody with predictive capabilities. I say this as a service to my audience, and what I hope will be a valuable service to our audience. You need to prepare for this crisis, my friends. And that means you need to set cash aside. You need to stock up on essentials, be conservative in your spending habits, and above all, pressure your elected representatives to demand that the United States government make meaningful concessions to Iran, because that is the only way to avoid the coming economic crisis. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on May 7th, 2026.